What follows is taken from my 1991 book, Patrimony. The book's subtitle is A True Story. The book's subject is My Father's Dying and Death, reported exactly as I saw it happen. The chapter I'll read from, chapter 3, is called Will I Be a Zombie? So, having arrived at his apartment to tell him about the tumor, I'd gone into the toilet where, while eyeing my grandfather's old shaving mug on a shelf beside the medicine chest, I'd rehearsed my lines for the 50th time. Then I'd come back out into the living room and looked at him slumped down in a corner of the sofa, waiting for the verdict. Lil waited in the other corner of the sofa. She said to me, "Philip, you want me to go?" "Of course not." "Herman," she said to him, "do you want me to stay?" But he didn't even hear her. And from then on, Lil was so silent, she might as well not have been here. "Well," he said slowly in a very gloomy voice, "what's the sad news?" I sat in the chair across from him, my heart pounding as though I were the one about to be told something terrible. "You have a serious problem," I began, "but it can be dealt with. You have a tumor in your head. But Dr. Myerson says that given the location, the chances are 95% that it's benign." I had intended, like Myerson, to be candid and describe it as large, but I couldn't. That there was a tumor seemed enough for him to take in. Not that he had registered any shock as yet. He sat there emotionless, waiting for me to go on. "It's pressing on the facial nerve, and that's what's caused the paralysis." Myerson had told me that it was wrapped around the facial nerve, but I couldn't say that either. "It's a tumor," I said, "but it's not malignant and it's operable. He can operate if we want him to. Dr. Myerson wants to speak to you about an operation, Dad. I think it's a good idea to go back and talk to him now that we know what's up. I think that all of us should sit down together in his office and see if an operation is feasible. Finally, it's going to be your decision." I then added feebly, "Myerson says it's a routine operation." Myerson had indeed used that phrase at the close of our phone conversation the day before, and I had thought, sure it is, routine for you. "Will my face get better if he operates?" "No, there just won't be any more deterioration. So this is the way I'm going to be." "I'm afraid so." 2 minutes, and I had learned to talk like a surgeon. "I see," he said. And then he fell silent, and then he was lost. Alone and lost, and I wouldn't have been surprised if right then he had died. His eyes were looking out to nowhere, onto nothing, like someone who had just been fatally shot. He was gone like that for about a minute. Then, having absorbed the blow, he was back in the midst of the struggle, estimating the scale of his loss. "Am I hearing? But the tumor is damaged, can't be retreated. The operation, as I understand it, will prevent anything further from happening. Unless the operation were itself to make something further happen, but I didn't go into that. I would let Myerson apprise him of the risks, as well as of the size of the tumor and the encasement of the facial nerve." "Will it grow back?" he asked. "I don't know. I wouldn't think so, but you'll have to ask the doctor. Look, you'll make up a list of questions. You'll write them down, you'll take them with you, and then you can ask the doctor everything you want to know. Will I be a zombie?" I don't think Myerson would propose this operation if he thought that could possibly be the outcome. But could it not be? Of the 15% who Myerson allowed were worse off after the surgery, weren't they zombies, or close enough to what my father meant by a zombie? And what about the 15% who didn't survive the operation at all? "Where is it?" he asked. "In front of the brainstem. That's at the base of the skull. The doctor will show you where exactly. I want you to write down all your questions so you can go over everything with him on Monday. I've made an appointment for us to see him and to talk this thing through with him on Monday." Of all things, he smiled. A wry half-smile, really, that worldly-wise, heartbroken smile that says, but of course. He put his hand to the base of his skull and, feeling nothing unusual there, smiled again. Well, everybody leaves this earth in a different way. And I replied, everybody lives on it in a different way. Everybody's battle is different, and the battle never ends. It's going to be an ordeal. But if the surgery seems to all of us the right way to proceed, then 2 months from now, we're going to be sitting right here talking, and you're not going to have that thing inside you pressing on those nerves. It was wretched being unable to believe my own words, but I did not know what else to say. I thought, 2 months from now, he'll be in a convalescent home, barely able to lift a spoon to feed himself his cereal. 2 months from now, he'll be a zombie in a bed somewhere, fed intravenously, whom I sit helplessly beside just the way he once sat with his dying father. 2 months from now, he'll be in the cemetery with my mother. In the meantime, he had gone off to the bathroom, and when he came out, he was talking about his appendectomy in 1944, when against heavy odds, he had survived a dreadful bout with peritonitis. He was remembering how I had nearly died of a burst appendix and peritonitis in 1968. Then he was back in 1942, recalling my hernia operation at age 9, how he had taken me to see the family doctor after I had been in distress on a Sunday drive with the family. It was the second time in a month we'd been to the doctor about my discomfort. I told the doctor, I insisted, this boy is not a complainer, there must be something wrong. And they told us there was nothing wrong, but I insisted, and eventually they found out I was right. I told Dr. Ira he should rest in peace. Do you remember our doctor, Ira Flax? Of course I do, I said. I was nuts about it. And my brother Charlie, he said, dying in my arms. Such a handsome man, all that energy. 4 children, he died in my arms, Philip, my older brother I worship. And my Milton, my brother Milton. Remember Milton? No, I said Milton died the year before I was born. That's how I got my middle name. Milton, he said. 19 years old, a brilliant student, shining light of the family. His senior year at Newark College of Engineering, on and on, remembering the illnesses, the operations, the fevers, the transfusions, the recoveries, the comas, the visuals, the deaths, the burials. His mind, in its habitual way, working to detach him from the agonizing isolation of a man at the edge of oblivion, and to connect his brain tumor to a larger history, to place his suffering in a context where he was no longer someone alone with an affliction peculiarly and horribly his own, but a member of a clan whose trials he knew and accepted and had no choice but to share. In this way did he manage to domesticate his terror and eat his lunch. And that night, as he reported to me the next morning on the telephone, to get 6 continuous hours of sleep before waking in a sweat at 5 a.m. I was not so lucky. I couldn't find any context to diminish my forebodings. The thought of his undergoing an operation as awful as that at the age of 86 was unbearable. And if he even made it successfully through the surgery, the prospect of a recovery. And if something should go wrong during the surgery, I couldn't sleep for 6 continuous minutes. Zombie, a word I don't suppose I'd heard since as children my brother and I used to go to see horror movies at the Rex Theater in Irvington. Zombie kept conjuring up the most hideous medical scenarios. The next morning, I phoned to ask if he wanted to go for a ride. No, he didn't want to go for a ride. But it was a beautiful spring day. We could drive up to the Orange Mountains. We could go to Grunning for lunch. No, he was better off at home. I said I would come over and we'd take a walk. He didn't want to go for a walk. I said I'd buy some lox and bagels and drive over and have lunch with him and Lil at the apartment. Was Lil around? She was upstairs. Tell her to come down and we'll have lunch together. It wasn't necessary. Maybe not for you, I thought, but it is for me. And so I went out and bought lox, bagels, and cream cheese in a 6th Avenue deli, and got the car and drove over to Jersey. When I got there, he was sitting as I had imagined, alone on the sofa, pitifully dejected looking. The shades were drawn, radio music wasn't on, and it appeared as though he hadn't even bothered to borrow yesterday's newspaper from one of his spendthrift neighbors. As I began to unpack the food I brought, he told me he wasn't hungry. I hoped they hadn't argued, though I wouldn't have put it past him, even at the time of his greatest need, to go to work first thing on one or more of those many failings of hers that it had become his mission to eradicate. She ate too much and was overweight. She was cheap and wouldn't part with a dime. She talked for hours on the phone with a sister of hers he couldn't stand. She was always running somewhere, to this flea market to buy crap, to that flea market to buy crap. She took stupid risks with money he told her to stick into CDs. She didn't drive a car to his satisfaction. The list was long, maybe even endless. Though, of course, at the beginning of their affair, it had been for him as it is for all of us. She had been perfect then, even her flaws were beautiful. If back then her physical proportions were characterized in rather more flattering terms than he would have used to describe them now. She's like that painter, he had told me. You know who I mean? I hadn't met Lillis yet, but I took a guess. Rubens? That's the one. Well, I said, Zoptic is nice too. Philip, he said shyly, I'm doing things I haven't done since I was a boy. We should all be so lucky, I told him. Lil had moved into my father's Elizabeth apartment building shortly after the death of her husband and a year after the death of my mother, and lived there with one of her two stepsons, Kenny, whose financial acumen didn't entirely meet my father's standards. Not only didn't my father approve of how Kenny went about his business, but he didn't like the way her boss ran the auto supply house where she worked as a bookkeeper either. And when he told Lil as much, instead of retorting that he didn't know what he was talking about, or that she didn't need his opinion, she sat and she listened and didn't talk back, and as I see it, this forbearance may perhaps have had more to do with what seduced him than did the Rubenesque amplitude that he soon came to see as a result of her continuing to eat much too much, despite his relentless upbraiding of her. Meal by meal. Course by course. Helping by help. Eating was her only revenge, and like the tumor, it was something he could not stop, no matter how he railed against it. He could never understand that a capacity for renunciation and iron self-discipline like his own was extraordinary, and not an endowment shared by all. He figured if a man with all his handicaps and limitations had it in him, then anybody did. All that was required was willpower, as if willpower grew on trees. His unswerving dutifulness toward those for whom he was responsible seemed to compel him to respond to what he perceived as their failings as viscerally as he did to what he took, and not necessarily mistakenly, to be their needs. And because his was a peremptory personality, and because buried deep inside him was an unalloyed nugget of prehistoric ignorance as well, he had no idea just how unproductive, how maddening, even at times how cruel his admonishing could be. He would have told you that you can lead a horse to water and you can make it. You just hock him and hock him and hock him until he comes to his senses and does it. Hock, a Yiddishism that in this context means to badger, to bludgeon, to hammer with warnings and edicts and pleas. In short, to drill a hole in someone's head with words.